Good morning, everybody. Welcome to a beautiful brand new day. Happy New Year. Wow, what a year, huh? Oh my goodness. And it is one of those years. Well, last year and this year is one of those years that really does test our mettle in walking our path. Either just talking about the path or actually walking the path. And that's the topic for today is knowing the path and walking the path. And first, I'd like to let everybody know that the chat room is open, and wherever you happen to be, you are welcome to join us in the chat room. Good morning from wherever you are, or to wherever you are. Hey, Kimberly, it is great to see you in the chat room. And if you aren't already following me here on the Temple Within Radio and Media, I would really be grateful if you would follow me and give me a like. There in that yellow box with the heart. If you could push that, that's great, because what that does is it lets the folks at iHeartRadio and all of those other wonderful distribution places know that people are liking the show. So if you could like it and follow it, that would be outstanding. So this morning, as I was getting ready, I thought, oh my goodness, this past year, talk about a challenge in knowing the path and actually walking the path. Well, I think a lot of us thought that at the end of the year things might just kind of smooth out, right? Turn the page, as Bob Seger says, and maybe 2021 would, settle down and put us all firmly on our path, and off we would go into the Aquarian age, and wham. Well, at least here in the United States. I know that not all of you live here in the United States, but wow, what a challenge. And what is the path anyway? And is the path changing? Is the path that we thought we knew changing? Is it growing? Is it going away? What does all this signify anyway? All of this change, all of this tumult that's going on. Well, I often say to myself, just hold the light, Dana. Just hold the light. Stay on the path. Keep me on my true soul path. That is my prayer, my mantra every day. Please keep me on my true soul path. Who am I talking to when I make that statement or request? Well, I'm talking to my higher self. I'm talking to soul. I'm talking to Creator. I'm talking to my guides, my ancestors. Keep me on my true soul path. Keep me on that bugger. Help me to shine my light. Man, we're going through some change. We are in the birth canal of change. And some days it's really easy. I have my morning routine, as you all know, of lighting my candles and welcoming the day and having gratitude and all of those good kind of things, being thankful for this life, because it certainly is, very fleeting. And most days I can stay on the path of my higher calling. And then there are days when I know that not only have I fallen off the path and I'm rolling around in the picker bushes, but I think to myself, why was I on that path anyway? What on earth did I even think I was accomplishing? Hey, Angie. Hi, Rob. And then Spirit always reminds me, Dana, your path. Remember your path. Hey, Katie. And what is my soul path? I think that, and this is just me personally, at least for myself, I think that I came here with, kind of a sort of an idea of what it is that I wish to accomplish. And I don't mean in the busy sense, but to accomplish for the growth of my own soul. And I believe that through the choices that we make in our lifetime, the way that we accomplish that or we don't accomplish that changes, it varies. And I think that it happens personally, in families, with colleagues, in communities, globally. And it really is, in my estimation, all of these challenges that come up, because there's just a lot of, you know, challenges to staying on the path and not get sucked into. So in the morning when I'm lighting the candles and I'm having my moments of gratitude and thanking life, and please keep me on my true soul path. Please keep me on that. Bring the teachings to me today that I need to stay on my path. Bring the teachings to me. Bring the teachers to me to keep me on my path. Some days, well, most days, I'm able to see the teachers as they come. If I see Sparrowhawk out here on this big old branch that he's kind of adopted as his perch, or an eagle flying over, or some other thing, it keeps me on my path. And then there are days when I kind of roll off the path. Maybe for a minute, maybe for a couple minutes, maybe for a whole day or two or three or four. I think the older I get, the more I recognize, crap, I've fallen off my path and I can't get up. Somebody help me. Somebody help me get back on my path. And what is it that takes me off my path? Because I know my path. My path is to help people. I've come here to be of service. I've also learned, the value as I've gotten older of being in service to myself and my own nourishment as well, balancing that. But I do believe that I've come here to be in service. So whether it's at Gathering Thunder Foundation or the School of Sacred Studies or in my family, I feel as though in many ways I'm here to be of service in a variety of ways. And I'm cool with that. And I know that part of my path is that I see spirit. I walk with spirit. Part of my path is that Inipi, that sweat lodge here in the Enchanted Forest that many of you have participated in ceremony, my Hochoka. That's part of my path. These beautiful icons that I have to the Holy Mother and to the Goddess and all those good kind of things. Spirit is my path. And being of service from the place of heaven and earth and bridging those is my path. But dang it, sometimes the earth part of my heaven and earth bridge really does sometimes kick my butt. Hey, Charlotte. He hane wash day. Sometimes the earthly part kicks my butt. I'm really interested in this conversation with all of you because I think that right now, with all the tumult that's going on in the United States, we can't ignore. Well, we can't ignore it. I don't know that our subconscious or our soul ignores it. I certainly can't ignore it. And no matter what side of the political divide that is obviously very present you sit on, one or the other, it's challenging the path for those of us that are here to be of service. And whether that service is to be in law enforcement, healthcare, media, just being a really good human being, that's a great path of service, isn't it? Just to be a good human being is a path of service, I believe. That's just me. Hey, Chue. He hane wash day. last few days, I've kind of fallen off the path. And I'm not one of those people who chooses to keep my head in the sand about politics. I'm not one of those people. I want to be awake and aware to all of my surroundings, physically and non-physically. It doesn't mean that I drown myself in the news or any of that, but I am very aware, and I do have periodicals and all of those sorts of things that keep me awake and aware. And I always go within, to sort through what's real, what's embellished, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm kind of hamstringed as well about the fact that I run a nonprofit organization. And as somebody who founded and runs a nonprofit organization, it does not behoove me to voice my political voice anywhere, social media, etc. I do, within my group of family and friends, very close circle. And so I don't contribute to that. I continue to pray, to hold the light, to stay on my path despite all of this that's going on. And so what do I pray for? Peacefulness. Peacefulness. Let me be an instrument of your peace. That's a really good path, isn't it? Let me be an instrument of your healing, of reconciliation. Hey, Delgadillo. Yeah, I'm with you, Rob. I went to the doctor last Tuesday. I love my doctor, Mudri Kakarala. She is amazing. She's amazing. I love this woman. Anyway, she kept taking my blood pressure. As you know, I have issues with my blood pressure anyway. And she took it 5 times, and she looked at me and she said, we have a problem. We have a serious problem here with you. It's your blood pressure. That lower number is not even near where it needs to be. So I hear you, Rob. So I'm having to temper all of that. But how do I stay on my path with all of this going on? And it's really kind of an interesting place to be as an Army brat, right? Man, I grew up in the military. That's my whole life. I come from a long line of military people. Going way back. I have grandfathers that fought in the American Revolution, the War of 1812, Confederate soldiers in the Civil War, and every war since then, grandfathers. And I recognize that my ancestors are also reacting through me, watching all of this go on. And so how do I stay the course? How do I stay the path? I have to be very conscious of it. I have to be consciously aware that this is what's happening around the world. When I was a little girl and my father was stationed at the Pentagon, my father worked for the Army Joint Chiefs of Staff. And so it was not an unheard of thing for me sometimes to go to the Pentagon to see my dad, or for me to go to the White House to see my dad. And I remember meeting the president at the time. And I still remember the feeling of the president's hand back then, and being in all of those places. And that's a very earthy aspect. And we all have earthy aspects. And then we have the spiritual path. Remember to pray. My sisters always say that. Remember to pray. Some days my prayers are really long and eloquent, and some days they're really, really short. Sometimes they're like, really, people? Can't we do better than this? Sometimes that's my prayer right there. But in those times when I get carried away with the earthy part, I realized that my spiritual part came here to make a difference. Because it does make a difference, everybody. And a lot of people have become kind of saddened that maybe this idea of holding the light and walking the path really didn't make a difference. It hasn't made a difference, and it isn't making a difference. I'm here to tell you that it does make a difference. Being a good human being, if that is your path, and hopefully that's part of all of our paths, is just to be a good human being. It makes a difference. Walking your spiritual path with integrity makes a difference. Every time that you and I connect with spirit, if you can imagine yourself wherever you happen to be around grandmother, when you are connecting with spirit, you are creating an arc that brings spirit here to the earth plane. And it doesn't matter if you are praying inside an Inipi sweat lodge, praying in a synagogue, praying on a park bench, praying in your shower, praying in sacred circle, in a cathedral, or as you are walking the dog. In those moments, you are creating an arc, a bridge, to bring the sounds, the octaves, the love, the light of what we call in our humanness, many of us, heaven to earth. It's been interesting in my meditations these days and my morning prayers, because I always call in my illuminated ancestors, the old ones. I want to hear from them. I want to hear from them. And I asked them the other day, why is it right now? I mean, I've lived through some things. I'm 58 years old, so I've seen some cray-cray in my life. Why is it that I'm really having to focus on staying on the path? And one of my ancestors said to me, Dana, what's happening right now is that you need to remember many of the ancestors in your blood and in your bones are also bearing witness to what's happening. Well, and then I thought about that for a moment. I thought, well, you know what? That's right. It's not just me inside this skin, inside this flesh. It's not just me. Who's walking with me? Who's bearing witness with me? If it is true that our ancestors walk with us, they stand behind us, and I believe that in my life to be true, even when I didn't have their names, I knew it was true, then they are also bearing witness to, and in some cases, re-experiencing, hopefully healing, reconciling with us, and sometimes I believe through us. And so we stay the path so that all of that can be done in a good way. At least that's the way that I feel about it. You know, a lot of people say to me, you know what, still after all of these years of me knowing you, decades of knowing you, you're still on this path. Yeah, I know the path and I walk the path. It doesn't mean the path is always the same path. For me, as a quadruple Scorpio person and as a natural gypsy soul, if I had to walk just one single path in a straight line my whole life, it just wouldn't do. It just wouldn't do. And I'm not saying that it's a bad thing if that's your path. It's a very, straight line path. But for me, it's been, a path, and kind of windy path. Sometimes people will say to me, how do you do it? How do you stay on that path? How do you continue that? Because it's not easy. And you all know that. When you stay on the path of your soul, not your career trajectory, I'm not talking about that, your corporate career trajectory, I'm talking about the path of your soul. It is not easy. Because when we do that, we are asked or moved to let go of things, to examine things, to re-examine things, especially our own self, to embrace things, sometimes to just dive headlong in, as I've been accused of doing by my dear friend Darlene. And you have to be open to change. Loss and change. And yes, I continue to walk the path, and I've walked it really since I turned 31 years old, so it's been a while. That was my moment of epiphany, was at 31. And thank you to Sonia Choquette and my dear friend Charmaine at the Dominican Center. My life pivoted in that moment. There are people who say that they're on the path, and I think with age we come to realize that they might be on the path during a weekend workshop. They might be on the path when it suits them to be on the path, when it feels good to be on the path, when it makes money for them to be on the path. And then there are those that are just on the path. And the path isn't always understood. And that's part of the reason why some people are weekend path walkers. And I call them the weekend warriors. It raises eyebrows. Frankly, a lot of people who actually walk the path tend to be more of the hermit type as they get older. Because there are a lot of people that want to know your path, or they think they want to walk a path. And for those of you that are teachers, you know what I'm talking about. People that come to you to learn and yet really don't have any interest whatsoever in furthering their path. They're just gleaning knowledge, your knowledge. I've learned over the years to be very careful with that. If I teach you, what are you going to do with it? It's one of my favorite phrases. Because a lot of what I've learned is from doing, not necessarily from reading. Charlotte is saying, during a meditation journey that I had yesterday after pulling a card from the virtual angel deck, well, thank you for that, Charlotte, I met with a gypsy ancestor named Serafina and had the awakening that both the pain she felt and feels and the healing balm of Saint Raphael reside in the DNA of my heart. And with that realization, the tears flowed and the soothing began to run like honey through this ancestral line. It was quite the sensation. Yeah, exactly. Thank you for sharing that, Charlotte. Our ancestors are really walking the path with us, particularly now. That Aquarian portal opened. And for me, anyway, really cemented this idea of the male and the female, the wisdom and the, that whole thing of meeting in the middle. Rob is sharing, sometimes the path is simply chosen for you, not by humans, but by spirit or fate, if there is a significant difference. Yeah, sometimes the path is chosen for you. Normally the path is brought to you. That's what I've experienced. I mean, I was born, all of us are born with innate talents. All of us. I believe everybody was born with a talent or talents, plural. And with those talents that you're walking with, the ancestors walking with you, your guides, etc., that spiritual paths are brought to you. Some of the paths that have been brought to me, I never in a million years would have imagined. Pouring sweat lodges, wouldn't have imagined. Having that chanupa, that pipe, never would have imagined. My soul knew it, but me, in my humanness, that's not what I chose. It was brought to me. And here's the other thing. Thank you for bringing this up, Charlotte and Rob. Sometimes when a path is presented to us, some people just willingly grab the path and they run with it because it was presented by somebody, without really considering where that path may lead, what that really means, what that path really means. In 2006, geez, hard to believe it's been 15 years ago now, when Joaquin said to me in a sweat lodge that White Owl woman told him that he was to teach me the ways and that I would be carrying a pipe, I wanted nothing to do with that. I didn't feel worthy of it. I was just me being me at that point, recovering from a stroke. And learning to walk again was, quite frankly, enough for me at that time in my life. And he looked at me, and there was the look on his face, and said, Spirit brought me to you. I'm not bringing this to you as a man. Spirit, your ancestors, and one day you're going to find out who your ancestors really are. Your ancestors are bringing this path to you. And I'm the one to bring you onto it. Well, I didn't answer right away. Oh, no, 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 no. Tara, you were there. You know. You were there with me. I considered it long and hard. And did a lot of praying. And it became apparent that, yes, this was going to be part of my path. And it has not been easy. As a green-eyed, light-skinned woman with mostly European ancestry, it has not been easy. And yet I stay on the path. I help where I can through gathering thunder. I pray like I've been taught to pray. I do things in the way that my relatives have taught me. I stay the path, but it has not been, and it is not easy. And yet all along, my grandmothers and grandfathers that are Seminole and Cherokee from Georgia were urging me along. Keep going, keep going. It's part of your path. And I keep going. But it wasn't without careful consideration. No different than when I wrote the book, Embracing the Mystic Within. That was not anything I was going to do. It was Sister Irene Mary MacDonald who said to me, Denise, you need to write a book for Catholics who have forgotten about the mystical path. I said, what? She said, you need to write a book. You're not the only person in the world with these gifts, so you need to write a book to help people understand that this is natural, that this is part of life, seen and unseen. Well, it took me a hot minute to think about that one, too. And the rest is history. Hey, Sally. Oh, thank you for that. And here in my lovely office, thank you, Claudia Nielsen, if you're listening to this, for my wonderful painting of the Black Hills, He Sapa. It's also not been easy to be the Catholic that speaks to spirit, because there's been a deep slumber of mysticism in this country. Not for Native America necessarily, for the native, indigenous people. In some places that has also fallen into slumber. But what I'm saying is the path, knowing the path and beginning to walk the path, is now being nudged along by the fact that here in America, particularly for those of us with European ancestry, I'll speak for myself, I have European, Native American, and African ancestry. There's been a long slumber of the mystic. And so part of my path was to wake the mystic up again, to wake the mystic up in the consciousness or the subconsciousness, the psyche of other people, because the time of the return of the mystic, of the healer, of the seer, of the wise woman, of the wise man, of the medicine person, the shaman, it's here. Aquarius says, welcome back to the realm of intuition, to the realm of the psyche, of the soul. Welcome back. And it's great, to sit in the pew on Saturday evening or Sunday morning and go to Vespers or go to Holy Day and all of those kind of things. It's another thing to then take the practice into antiquity and bring it into this day as a seer, as a sensitive. And yet that's my path. And I walk it, and it's not always easy. Years and years ago, Charmaine, my spiritual director, said to me, I wouldn't want to be you for anything. Nobody could pay me enough money to be you. I said, good Lord, Charmaine, why is that? She said, you do realize that every day of your life the darkness is going to nip at your heels, to challenge you, to try to take you off your path. She was right about that. So whether it's the darkness of ignorance or gossip or malfeasance or straight out wickedness, she's right about that. And you all know what I'm talking about. It's not just happening to me. And that's the importance of staying on the path anyway. Staying on the path anyway. For a lot of people, this year has been a really big challenge staying on the path because a lot of people haven't been able to go to church or synagogue. Right? How do they stay on the path if there's not a building for them to go into? You're welcome, Rob. You are welcome, Rob. How do you stay on the path? I'll tell you what's been hard, not being able to fire up that sweat lodge every other weekend, right? I know that ucky stuff floats around in the steamy air inside a sweat lodge, so I am not even going to try. I'm not going to risk it. Just like shutting down the school once Todd and I were exposed to COVID. Shut it down. It'll reopen mid-March with very small numbers of people, appropriately sitting apart from one another just as before. But my point in all of that is we can have an extraordinary path outside of the four walls of a building or the willow bones of Sweat Lodge. But we also have a human part, because we did, after all, everybody come here to be human. And balancing those two things is where it can kind of get tricky. It can get tricky. Well, if you're spiritual, don't you believe that no virus is going to get you? Well, I learned a long time ago that not only if you're spiritual can viruses get your behind, right? I had a major left brain stroke. Oh, and then a heart attack. So the moral of the story right there is our spiritual path also lives within the reality that you and I have a physical body. Balancing heaven and earth. It's what most of you, myself, those on the spiritual path are always trying to do. And sometimes we veer more into the earth lane, and then we kind of come to the median and we veer back into the spiritual lane. It's really good to walk that and drive that road right there in between. But sometimes we're called to go into the spiritual lane for prayers, to help somebody on their path. I call all that shining our light. For me, I found I've been thrust on the paths of error before the rest of humanity stumbles upon them with raised stakes. I am referring to 16, 17 years ago. I find it interesting how many who condemn me then are swept away now. Yeah. Yep. There have been more than one person in my adoptive family who have said that I just kind of, lost my mind. No, actually, I didn't lose my mind. I listened to the voice of my soul and honored it. And honored it. And not everybody understands the path. A lot of people, if they were to walk into this sanctuary, that is my office, would probably not understand, my Black Madonna statuary or my statuary of the goddess Isis or the Kaliak. They certainly would not understand the Native American altar that I have here, my indoor Hochoka. Wouldn't understand that, and that's okay. And for those of you that are listening to me that are really young and you're thinking, yeah, people are like really freaked out by my path, that will probably be part of your reality. But what changes is that you come to understand that even if they're freaked out by it, you need to walk it. Yeah, you're right about that, Rob. Absolutely. You need to continue to walk it because that's where wonderful conversation has happened in my life over and again. Charlotte is saying, I believe our physical symptoms are Spirit's way of getting our attention to what would be beneficial to address regarding our growth. Keep us on our path. Absolutely. You're right about that, Charlotte. And I've learned subsequent to that at least in the realm of seers, whether they are medicine people or shamans or seers, in that category, many of us walk through the path of the left brain stroke. Why? Because it opens up the other half of the brain even further to spirit. It's hard to believe, and Todd can't even hardly believe when I tell him this. I used to be quite a math whiz before 2005. Quite a math whiz. Well, that went right out the window and out the door and every other place of departure that year. And I remember the psychiatrist, Dr. Gribben, coming in to see me in the hospital, and she said to me, the guys are concerned because you don't want to take antidepressants. And I looked at her and I said, well, I have nothing against antidepressants, but they're not for me. This happened to me for a reason. And she looked at me and she said, once I was blind and now I see. She said, Denise, this has everything to do with your spiritual path. I said, exactly. Thank you for understanding that. Thank you for understanding that. And she was right. No, I am no longer a math whiz. I don't even want to be a math whiz. It's amazing how our path continues to grow and to unfold when we allow it. But having discernment, oh, that can be really heartbreaking, the discernment piece. Let's get back to, for just a moment, for those that feel as though they are no longer on the path because they've not been able to get to their place of worship. Well, everybody, you can actually have a sacred space in your own home. You can have a sacred space in your own home. You can have a sacred space out on your lanai, out in your backyard. You can have that space on Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. You have permission to light the candles. You have permission to light the incense and to create your own sacred space. If weekly worship is part of your path, you are allowed to continue that within your own space. And if you're somebody looking for permission, I'm giving you permission this morning. I don't know why I'm saying that at this time, but Spirit asked me to just say that, so perhaps there's somebody out there. Two traditions, Strega and Druidry, require self-initiation. They do this for a reason. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that, Rob. Knowing the path is one thing. It's great to know a path. It's great to know about lots of paths. I know about a lot of paths because I am a book nerd. If Kelly Spencer were on this show right at this time, she would tell you, yes, I am a book nerd. I read voraciously, and not digital books either. I'm one of those people that are tactile, and I have to have the pages to turn and all that kind of a thing. I read and I study. I've got a new book I'm kind of interested in. The 3 Magical Books of Solomon. Why, there's just a nice little romance novel, right? Between heaven and earth. The 3 Magical Books of Solomon. That's my new piece that I'm getting ready to read. That doesn't mean I'm going to walk that path, but I like to know about a lot of paths. I like to be educated. Yes, sometimes in hopes that people will be educated enough to understand that whatever they see in me or around me has purpose and meaning. You've never had to move a library, have you? Just the one here in the house. And I'm really thankful because I have a lot of friends who will mail me a book and I'll mail it back. But yeah, you're right about that, Rob. I have several libraries here in the house, as many of you know. On every floor, just about in every room, there's a library of my home. Sally says, me too. Do you read more than one book at once? I sure do, Sally. You bet I do. Yep. I'm reading, on one hand, for my one half of my brain, I'm still reading the Discovery of Witches trilogy. I'm on the last book. And at the same time delving into these sorts of things. I sure do. I have books all over, and I take them and I absorb them a little bit, and then I have a book in front of me from Nicole Fix the She book, S-H-E, the She book, which is outstanding. And every so often I'll walk by and I'll pick that up. Well, I think that, the reason that I wanted to talk about this morning is that we all have a path. And sometimes that path is kind of like a tree. It has some branches. Because that's who we are, especially here in the West. Especially here in the West. And we may know of the path of our ancestors. And right now that path may be calling you. I say pick up the phone and have a conversation. Find out about that ancestral path. Maybe the ancestral path isn't spiritual. Maybe it's the ancestral path to cooking. Cooking as the ancestors did. Celebrating the holidays as the ancestors did. And of course adding your own flair, because it is the year 2021. The path can be about not like me and many others lighting candles and incense in the morning and greeting the day, and it doesn't have to be that way. The path can also be, the spiritual path can be celebrating the holidays as your ancestors did. And it can be more than one line of ancestry, because you probably have more than one line. Cooking as they did. Learning about their art. There are many pathways, and we can know about them or we can walk them. If you're scared to walk them, if you're scared to walk the path through ancestral fear, ancestral trauma, because those are real things, if you are fearful to walk the path of spirituality, whether it is Strega, Druidry, the pagan path, an indigenous path, and I'm saying indigenous, and I'm kind of blanketing the globe, indigenous, the heathen path, the Christian path, Judaic, whatever it happens to be, if you are afraid, don't be afraid on top of that to reach out and get some help to find out why you're afraid. Nicole Fix, Terry Ruel could probably help unblock some of those things. When you find out where the blockage is, mentally and emotionally, you can see a practitioner to help move energies. The bottom line with staying on the path too is, what will people say? Have you ever said that to yourself? What will people say? You're welcome, Sally. Here's the thing, everybody. People are going to say something no matter what. It doesn't matter what you do. People are going to talk. They're going to bump their gums. That's how it is. You have to be okay with the fact that people are going to talk. People aren't always going to be kind. And you need to be okay with that. And if you're not, maybe you need an assist with that. Getting a little spiritual thick skin. That's where being well educated about your path comes in. If you're practicing Wicca, if you're practicing something outside of the isms, people are really probably going to raise their eyebrows. However, having said that, it also starts wonderful conversation when those conversations can be had. When I divorced my husband in 2004, according to the church canon, I was not supposed to ever take communion again. Right? Those are the rules of the country club, as I call them. The rules of the country club say if you get divorced, at least in this parish, then you don't come to communion. But that doesn't mean that I can't take the practices of everything that I learned from my childhood into my adulthood and bring them into my life and make them my personal path. Whoever it is that needed to hear that right now. If for whatever reason you were left to feel as though you could no longer be part of your church or what have you, that does not mean that you cannot take the beauty of whatever it was that you found beautiful into your own space. People are going to talk. If you're going to listen to anybody who's out there bumping their gums or putting a meme out or whatever it happens to be, listen to the voice of your soul. Listen to the voice of your ancestors. Those are the voices you want to listen to, the voice of Creator. I remember one time, people do find it odd that some of my clients are actually Catholic priests and nuns. And that's they're shocked because they don't understand the history of their own religion. They don't understand the mystical or the esoteric aspects of Christianity. I remember saying to one of the padres years ago when he called me to see for him, "Denise, I need you to see for me. You're a seer. Will you see for me?" And I remember saying to him, "You know, Father, I never thought the day would come when priests would be calling me to see for them." And he said to me, "There's going to come a day when there will be more of them. Because the day is coming when what has been hidden is going to see the light of day again." And I believe, everybody, that's right now. Years ago, I had a priest from St. Petersburg, Russia, come to my home for me to see for him. And I looked at Father. He's a Franciscan, so he had, the Franciscan robes and the bowl cut and all of this. My friend Darlene was there at the time. My kids were home, and the doorbell rang, and Father was standing there in his robes and looking like Francis of Assisi, quite frankly. And we were sitting in my living room, and he said, "I've come here from Russia because I need you to see for me." And I looked at him and I said, "Surely, Father, there have got to be seers in Russia and far-flung places between Russia and Michigan in the United States that have people who can see for you." And he looked at me and he said, "But you walk the path. You are a seer. You're real. And I was really touched by that acknowledgement of my walking the path, not just knowing it, but walking it. I said, "How did you know about me?" He said, "I prayed." and I reached out to someone here, and they told me where to find you. And in that moment, I'll never forget it. We were sitting in the formal living room in front of the fireplace. And in that moment, I could see Padre Pio standing in front of the fireplace. And for those of you that are not really aware of Saint Padre Pio, he bore the stigmata. And it is said that he bled from the palms of his hands about half a cup of blood every day. Well, Padre Pio was standing in front of spiritually speaking, standing in front of the fireplace, and he began to bleed. He was Catholic, Rob. And I looked at Father and I said, Padre Pio is here and he is bleeding and he is asking me to tell you that your work is with the children, but it's children outside of Russia. And Father looked at me and he put his hands up over his eyes and he began to cry. And when he took his hands down and he rested them in his lap, he looked at me and he said, Padre Pio is my patron saint. He is my personal patron saint. And he's the one that I prayed to in order to ultimately find you. And the answer I was seeking was, do I stay in Russia or do I begin working with the children in Brazil? And we just sat in the silence of that moment. And then I made a pot of tea. I put the kettle on, as Amantha would say. And we had tea. And he and I talked about the path, about knowing the path and walking the path. And he said, you know, the path can become complicated and it's not easy. And I love living in St. Petersburg, Russia. He was a Franciscan, he was Catholic, and his path was to feed sandwiches to the homeless every day, hundreds. They would line up. Every morning they would line up, and Father would feed them sandwiches. And yet his soul and the path told him. And he needed reassurance, and he prayed, and ended up in Rockford, Michigan. And now he's with the children in South America. He followed the path. Knowing the path knows that we have a path. And it also means that we know that the path isn't always going to be pristine, kind, easy. But we also know that despite that, it is the most joyful, fulfilling, astonishing way to live and learn. If there's one thing the path has taught me, it is that we're all related. It is that we are interconnected, not only here on Grandmother, but also in those amazing oceans and seas of the stars and planets, the oceans of octaves of intelligence and wisdom, the path helps us know that we don't do anything in a vacuum, that our ancestors walk with us for a reason, not just to be looky-loos. They're healing through us, with us. They're learning through us, with us. We're constantly arcing a bridge between heaven and earth, and are we bridging goodness? That's the key. Are we bridging goodness? Just like I will not cook when I'm angry, I will not prepare a meal when I am angry. And as a quadruple Scorpio, I've had opportunity to learn that rather than cook while I am angry, I need to sit for a few minutes and do some deep breathing, and to remember that what I'm doing is preparing a meal for those that I care about. I don't pray when I'm angry. I don't come to my sacred space when I'm angry. You're not going to find me down at the Inipi angry. I'm going to sit on the sideline and I'm going to take some deep breath, and I'm going to bring myself back to myself, to a place of balance, and then I'm going to be on the path. Because what arc am I arcing? One out of anger? One out of compassion, concern, love? We have a choice on the path. Right now, everybody, I'm pretty sure that I speak for a lot of folks when I say that here in the United States of America, we could use some arcing of some love. Sometimes tough love. I'm not just saying the mushy-gushy, but arcing some love, compassion. In other words, arcing some goodness. Maybe you'll light a candle today. Every morning, on behalf of the School of Sacred Studies, part of my path is that when I get up, I walk and I light the candle to St. Francis of Assisi. And as I am lighting that candle, let me be an instrument of your peace. May there be world peace and healing every morning, unless I'm somewhere else. And even if I'm camping, I still light a candle in the morning. Make me an instrument of your peace. Thank you for world peace and healing. That can be a path right there. Right? Okay. Del Marie is sharing, I've seen a lot in my 69 years what walking the path means. The guidance, the miracles that come with the faith when walking the path. Absolutely, Del. And you and I have been there for some of those miracles. Right on, Sally. Miracles. Astonishing. When walking the path. I know part of the reason that my grandson is so well and healthy. Rob, you were there when Amantha Murphy was here 2 autumns ago when he was born. And we had a wonderful Celtic ceremony. She asked me, Dana, can I lead a ceremony for your grandson in the Irish way? Well, my grandson on his daddy's side is 100% Irish and Scottish. That's it. And so I said, absolutely. His ancestors will love to be called to that ceremony. And Rob, you were there, and we had amazing ceremony celebrating the path of the old ones today. And simultaneously, it only takes one phone call to Del Marie or Barb or both, and before long the 3 of us are in prayer for Easton, for Elise. And the old ones love to be called in. Today. And the question is, are we arcing goodness, anger? Please don't arc any more anger if you can help it. Anchor your light, arc your light. Bring that light on in. Bring the love on in. With that, everybody, Terry Ruel was supposed to have a show this morning, but instead she's having a carport built. They showed up this morning unexpectedly. So our beautiful friend Terry Ruel will be on next month with the second half of Why Don't They See What I See? Okay, everybody, get out there and shine your light, because only you can shine it from wherever you are shining. Thank you for that, Angie. I love you all. Blessings be.